Today we will learn kick drum layering using two techniques to get this sound. No matter how large your sample library is, there will never be a kick sample that you just drag into the project and use without any adjustments. Each techno track is different and will require an individually crafted kick. Even if you are prepared to browse through hundreds of kick drum samples, learning how to create one that suits your track perfectly by taking only the best elements from individual samples is much faster and more satisfying. It's as easy as understanding three things. What elements does your kick need, frequency separation and phase relationship or phase alignment. By the way, if you like the beat from the beginning of the video and if you like especially that distorted screech synths, very soon I will drop a preset pack with similar sounds. Rave Techno Reinforcement Volume 2 is about screech, hoover and solid presets that are fully adjustable with macros for both Expert Serum and Ableton Wavetable. On top, I will throw in MIDI files and Ableton effect track or two to help you transform any lead sound into its best version. Sign up for the waiting list on the website, get a demo version of the pack and get notified as soon as the full pack is released. While on many YouTube tutorials about kick drum layering you see the actual layering techniques, the question I get asked most often by producers during private lessons is: how do you know what samples and how many of them you want to layer? This question is too broad and there are too many factors to consider, so let's try asking a series of simpler questions instead. The first one would be what kind of a kick drum I want to make. Fortunately, this question is easy to answer. Most of you are just going to remember a track where you heard a perfect kick drum and thought to yourself, I want to make a similar kick. So I have here 4 examples of a kick drum you would be interested in making. What can you usually do is to split the kick drum into its 3 most common elements. The transient, so the very beginning of the kick that gives the sound the click. The body, that's the part of the kick that fills mostly mid-frequencies. And the tail or rumble, that's the part of the kick that fills the low end. This can already give you an idea on how many different samples we need for a kick drum. For example, the Rajski kick sound might require a kick sample with a crunchy high end to give us that bright and sharp transient. To make the body of the kick drum and to fill it with mid-frequencies, we might need another kick sound that might be longer than our first sound we used to create the kick transient. The rumble part can be also another sound. It can be made by, for example, using reverb to create a reverb rumble. Or you can throw in a rolling bassline sound. That already makes 3 different sounds to use, but this amount can slightly vary depending on the samples you have. For example, if you want to make a very fat kick, you might need more than a single kick sample to create the body of it. What kind of samples would be good for making Rajski style kick? The fastest way is to use anything that already sounds rumbly and very distorted out of the box. If we listen to the last kick drum and its individual elements, we can imagine we could use similar sounds to make this kind of kick as well. It all depends on the sample processing that comes later. What about the thumb kick drum? Both transient and kick drum body sound clean, meaning that the samples used here didn't get lots of saturation or end distortion. The only sound that is crunchy here is the tail, which is just a bassline sound. It's easy to find clean kick samples to create a similar sound in transient and body. We can look for them on Splice. If you search Techno kick, you will get lots of clean, generic kick samples that fit our needs. Alignment style kick drum, depending on what track from him you will play, is going to sound more or less clean. This track is on its dirtier side. The transient sounds more full in comparison with the Sam kick drum. And we could say the same thing about kick drum's body. To create this style of a kick drum, I would recommend Vengeance Essential Club Sounds pack. Doesn't matter what volume you will pick, the samples there sound full straight out of the box without unnecessary distortion. Okay, before we go further, if you like the way I explain stuff, let me advertise myself quickly and just say that if you wish to have other sound design or music production subjects explained in such an easy and practical way, consider going onto my website to learn more about my private music production lessons. Free consultations are available as well. In this video, I will be making a kick drum in style of this track. What can I say about this kick drum? Definitely it seems short. I can clearly see the transient, the body, and the tail of the kick, which is just a rolling bass line. This kick sound is also thin and it doesn't sound like it has lots of distortion added. So, if we refer back to the previous section of this video, we can say we will need at least 3 different sounds. The first sound is the tail of this kick drum, the rolling bass line. You can grab such a bass line from a sample pack, or you can use my tutorial to make that bass line by yourself. This is the bass sound I will use. Let's move to kick samples. We need them to create the kick drum's body and transient. Since the reference kick drum was subtly distorted, I need clean samples. On Splice, I found a few techno and minimal techno kick samples. At first, we will be interested in choosing our first kick sample for the body. It makes sense because the kick drum's body takes more space than the transient. The kick drum body also fills the mid-frequencies most, and the mid-range is the most important frequency range in any track or genre. I will make sure that all 6 samples will be played with their full lengths. That means I want to turn off the snap switch on each sample. To not work with unnaturally stretched kick sounds, I will make sure the warping is turned off as well. I create the MIDI clip and play each kick sound to fill out what sample will fit the bassline most. In my opinion, this sample creates a nice body that goes along with the rolling bassline. It's important to play the bassline along. While it seems counterintuitive, because apart from the kick drum, there is another sound that might distract us, it's a better way to pick the right sounds, because in the end, what is important is how all the elements in the track come together, and not how do they sound like in solo. I can rename this kick sample to organize the drum rack. And fine-tune the sample in simpler. While playing the kick along with the bassline, I can change the pitch of the kick drum. I can also make the sample shorter to alter the rhythm between the kick and bassline. If after trimming the sample like that, we will start to hear weird clicks at the end of sample playback, we can use the fade out knob to get rid of the click. We can make the kick drum hit softer if we use the fade in knob. At last, when everything about the sample is adjusted, I want to fine-tune its volume in relation to the rolling bass. Shortening the kick sample is one way to create the rhythm between the kick and the bassline. The other one is a classic sidechain compression or volume automation on the bassline to make it more pumping. Since the bass here is just a sample, I can use fades to simulate the sidechain compression. Of course, we could use the same technique if instead of a rolling bassline we had, for example, a rumble reverb. So far, we have the kick drum foundation, that is our first sample that gives the kick its body, and the rhythm, because we trimmed the kick and used a fade on the bassline. It's a good moment to compare our kick to the reference one. It's going to give us an important answer to the question, what does my kick drum need more? This will also help you answer another, more general question that you might ask. How do you know what samples and how many of them you want to layer? With time and experience, you will be able to fill out what does your kick need without comparing your sound to the reference one all the time. But in the beginning stages of music production, this simple trick speeds up the process a lot. I do feel like the kick drum in the reference track hits harder in the beginning. The kick sound also seems fuller than my kick sound. Our kick needs more punch and a fuller sound, so let's think of how kick drum layering can help with getting both. But at first, for more understanding, I'm going to show you what solutions, in case of our kick drum, won't work. A typical solution to make a kick sound fuller would be to use saturation. While saturation, or distortion, definitely helps making a sound fuller by adding more frequency content to the sound, it's going to also reduce the punch of the kick drum at the same time. That's because saturation and distortion plugins indirectly reduce the dynamic range. If the term dynamic range is new to you, it's basically a difference in volume between loud and quiet parts of the sound, but in this video you are going to get a more detailed explanation of dynamic range, peak volume and average volume levels. In this channel, I have a kick drum with sound noise decapitator added to beef up the sound. Once I turn on and off this plugin, you will hear that the kick indeed sounds more full, but it also loses its punch. Something we want to avoid if we want our kick to sound like in the Speed Masters track. For that reason, I would avoid using here saturation whenever I can. Another typical thing to do is to use a compressor on a kick drum to make it more punchy and hard-hitting. In this channel, I'm using a volume automation that simulates a compressor. You can see that this shape makes the tail of the kick drum quieter, and that's the same thing a compressor would do. So, when I compare the kick with and without the LFO tool, you will hear that the kick with LFO tool indeed gets punchier, but because we turn down in volume some part of the kick, it's also going to sound less full. Again, that's something I want to avoid. You could think of these two effects, that is the saturator and LFO tool, and say, what if I make a kick fuller with saturation at first, and then add back the punch by using a LFO tool or a compressor afterwards. The third channel combines these two effects. If I listen to the kick and turn on and off this chain, you will hear the kick both becomes fuller and stays punchy, but if we compare that kick to the reference one, we will also understand that our kick drum doesn't sound that clean anymore. The presence of saturation in our kick drum is very obvious, and this is something I can't hear in the reference track. We could turn down the amount of saturation, but then the kick drum would not sound that full. Let's return to the main subject of our video and learn how kick drum layering can both make the kick sound fuller and punchier. On top of our main kick sound, I will start playing remaining kick samples while the bassline is playing in the background. We want to focus on which kick drum sample is going to give the sound the right punch. Once we find the sample that goes along well, we will layer it properly with the main kick sound. For me, this kick seems to fit best, it gives the right kind of punch. To add this kick drum to the main one, I need to at least get rid of the low end from this sample. This is super important, because if we let the low frequencies from both sounds to overlap, we will have messed up low end in the track that will be impossible to mix properly. Fortunately, it's as easy as just using a high pass filter on the kick drum I want to layer. If I'm using EQ8 from Ableton, I want to pick the most steep high pass filter available and use the cutoff knob to find a sweet spot. I am going to sweep that knob slowly so you can hear the difference in the sound. Until around 100 Hz mark, the kick drum will keep sounding weird. Either the low end will sound weaker or the kick drum's transient, that is the beginning of the kick, is not going to sound precise. From 100 Hz mark, everything will start to sound more aligned and cleaner, and from my experience, most of the kick drum layers are high passed anywhere from 100 to 300 Hz range. As you can hear, the kick drum sounds more solid when the kick layer is high passed, but if you can't hear the difference enough, let's use a low pass filter on the master channel. If we focus on the low end of our kick drum, we will understand better how high passing the kick drum layers help keeping the low end solid. Of course, I could try setting up the cutoff knob even higher than 300 Hz, so higher than usually, but then I will start to cut the mid frequencies of the kick drum layer. If that happens, our kick drum will have more high frequencies added, and that doesn't help with making the kick sound fuller. I also have to say one thing about the type of a filter. In Ableton, we can pick either an aggressive filter like that, or we can choose a filter with less slope. When it comes to the filters with less aggressive curve, notice that even though the cutoff knob is set to 150 Hz, the filter can still pass through some lower frequencies. This can remove the low end from the kick drum layer not precisely enough, which will result later in a weaker low end in the whole track. Let's compare these two types of filter now to hear the difference in the punch. To isolate the low frequencies, I use the more aggressive filter more often. Lots of you might prefer another equalizer like the Pro Q3 by Fab Filter. If you have been using it for a while, you could notice it has more filter types to choose from, including even more aggressive high and low pass filters than those you can find in Ableton's EQ8. If there are more aggressive filter types available, does it mean that we can separate the low end better and end up with an even better result? That isn't guaranteed. The resulting kick drum is going to just sound different, but it's a matter of personal preference if that different sound is better or worse. Let's try out a few more types inside of Pro Q3 to hear a difference in the kick sound. When it comes to just the low end separation, the 48 dB per octave high-pass filter is good enough for this job, and this is exactly the type of filter you can find in Ableton's EQ8. The second filter, which is less aggressive, is a 12 dB per octave one. But why exactly different filter types give a different kick sound? When talking about aggressiveness of a filter, we also often consider phase shifts that a filter adds. Phase shifts can result in various frequency cancellation when sounds are layered, and they also change the way of how two samples interact with each other. To learn more about phase issues, please refer to this video where I explain the subject more deeply. From practical point of view, I'm going to say that as long as the low end from the kick drum layer is removed, we can use different filter types to control the amount of phase shift added. The more aggressive the filter, the more of a phase shift is added, and the resulting kick drum sounds different. We can take advantage of that to shape the kick drum's transient, so the very beginning of the kick drum, by playing around with different types of a high-pass filter. Again, this makes sense only as long as the filter removes the low end properly. To sum everything up, a high-pass filter on a kick drum layer is necessary to prevent the low end from overlapping. Aside from cleaning the low end with the cutoff knob, we can also use different filter shapes to control the kick drum's transient by using the filter's phase shift to our advantage. There are two other techniques to control how two kick drum samples interfere with each other, and these will come handy, especially if you don't own an advanced equalizer like a Pro Q3. After using a high-pass filter, I will be playing further with the phase and phase shifting. As you have seen in the previous section, with a high-pass filter, we already use phase and phase shifting to adjust the sound of the kick by choosing different type of a high-pass filter. But a primary goal was to get rid of the low end from the kick drum's layer. Now we will try out two techniques to mess around with the phase only. The first one is to flip the phase of a kick layer completely. This will make the kick drum's waveform look mirrored. Now you can see the waveform of our kick drum layer before and after such a trick. If we play each of these kick drum layers with a main one, we can imagine the resulting kick drum is going to sound different. Let's hear that difference in the sound. Flipping the phase is as easy as dragging an utility with the phase invert preset on the kick drum layer. It doesn't matter whether that utility is before or after the EQ8. Depending on the kick samples, this can either bring a large or subtle difference to the sound, but here the difference is large enough to hear that the kick layer with inverted phase makes the kick drum sound better. A while ago, you have seen the difference in the waveform after flipping the phase, so let's return for a second to different types of a high-pass filter. What you see now is the waveform of the kick drum's layer after using different high-pass filters. The cutoff frequency in all examples is identical. What only changes is the aggressiveness of a filter. The difference in the waveform is a combined result of different amount of low end being cut and the phase shift added by the filter. Flipping the phase of a kicked layer gives you another way to shape the kick drum's transient, but this gives limited control over the sound. The second trick I can recommend for a more precise control over the phase and the transient is to play the kick drum layer from a slightly different starting point. To do that, go to the sampler and start trimming the sample from the left. Picking a different starting point in small amounts doesn't change the sound of the kick drum's layer itself, but it definitely changes the way the kick drum layer will interfere with the main kick sound. and that's it. Both phase and high pass filter is adjusted, so what's left to finish layering this kick drum is to adjust the volume level of the kick layer in relation to both main kick sample and rolling bassline. I like the way the kick becomes fuller, but I don't like the fact that the transient of the kick is now too clicky. I have to tell you that aside from using a high pass filter during layering, we can also use a low pass one on either a kick drum layer or on the main kick sound. You can try using such a filter on both sounds to decide on what kick sound such a filter is going to sound better. Further adjustments like a cutoff frequency or the steepness of a filter is also a matter of personal preference and kick drum samples you are using in your track. In a similar way, a high pass filter makes the low end cleaner, a low pass filter can make the high end of the resulting kick drum cleaner. After some trial and error, I decided to use a low pass filter on the main kick sample. After adding one more sample to the kick drum, we can compare it again to the reference kick drum. I do feel like the kick drum in the reference track is slightly fuller, though the transient of our kick already sounds fine. Let's try adding a third kick drum sample. I'm going to repeat the exact workflow I showed you when I layered the second kick sound. We will begin with choosing the kick sample to add, then I will use an equalizer, and then I will play around with phase flipping and starting point of a sample. In the end, I might change the kick drum's pitch or lengths in simpler and adjust the sample volume. I compare my kick drum to the reference once again. And I think my kick sound is already full enough, meaning I don't need to add more samples. If we listen to each individual kick drum element in the drum rack, we will discover an important rule. Each kick drum element should add something different to the sound. The main kick sample gives the kick drum its body and lots of mid frequencies. The second kick sample, so the first layer, adds to the sound that click and transient. The third sample complements the kick drum's body with both mid and high frequencies. Such kick sample can be later processed as usual, meaning I can, for example, glue all the kick layers a bit with some distortion and then equalize the whole kick sound. This is a standard kick drum group processing you have seen in lots of my kick drum tutorials, including the hardest style industrial techno kick tutorial, so to keep the video shorter, I will just turn on these effects to show you the final kick sound.